Yeah, and of course there was another big headline this week. It's about the end of Infowars, the outlet of Alex Jones. Now, Alex Jones, obviously a Trump supporter, big Trump supporter, but also a huge supporter of Vladimir Putin and the Russians. And this is, of course, tied to this whole Sandy Hook fiasco. These were terrible reports, sometimes done by amateurs over at Infowars. They were claiming the Sandy Hook parents, the parents of these dead children, parents were crisis actors. This was all a conspiracy of the deep state to harm the Second Amendment. Now, obviously, you could have done good reports on the topic. You could have looked at the shooter and the background and all that went so horribly wrong. You could make good reports supporting the Second Amendment, but they chose to make viral claims and they got money for it and they got clicks for it, and it finally caught up to them. And so this went through the courts and the lawyers were battling each other, and now there's no other solution apparently but to liquidate pretty much anything Alex Jones owns. That's private property. That's his media companies that he has. There are various limited liability companies that he
Here's
has.
a question for you. What is the worth of those companies without Jones's
Pretty
personality
much,
behind them?
pretty much nothing. I mean, this is what Jones is admitting right now. If they seize these 8-year-old cameras and these 8-year-old broadcast switchers, it's not worth much. And the stock they have of these supplements they sell, it's worthless, as well as the merchandise, if somebody else owns it and tries to sell it to the audience. Now, even if everything is liquidated and lawyers get paid and the Sandy Hook parents may actually see some money, maybe they won't because there's nothing left. When it's all said and done, um, the Sandy Hook parents, they could still come after Jones. They could still come after him if he acquires more money in the future. If he continues with another website, if he works for somebody else, they can come after him. And there's been accusations in the last, I think, 2 years or whatnot, or 3 years, accusations that he may be hiding money, right? He, of course, says he's not hiding money. Because there are these different companies, right? So one company for the supplements, one company that runs Infowars, another company that does this and this and that. And supposedly these different companies are in debt to each other, while, there's questions about the true ownership of these companies. So if he filed, or when he filed for bankruptcy protection, which he did, if in case, hypothetically, if he was hiding money, that's probably a federal crime. I mean, I'm not an American lawyer, obviously, but I've heard that legal opinion somewhere. If there's some discrepancy, he may be on the hook in a criminal sense. So this is not the Sandy Hook people coming after him. This is the government coming after him for
Could it
bankruptcy
be that
fraud.
he is coming forward now to avoid the possibility of charges of fraud,
I think there
criminal
was
fraud?
literally no other way because there was another option discussed, which meant that he was going to pay them 5.5 million dollars per year for 10 years, so he could stay operational. He would do his usual thing, pay them this money.
He can pay that much money every year and still
I
function.
kind of. He once said that it costs him $7 million to run that place, to pay all his people, and to pay for the technology and to pay for everything. But obviously, when you looked at his website for the last couple of years, they just simply reposted a lot of stories from Russia Today or Sputnik or any of these other Russian platforms. So they were apparently not even paying for that content. They were just reposting it. Then they were constantly quoting stuff from other people on the web. Um, Even with the Sandy Hook stuff, they would have Owen Schroyer on the air, in front of millions of people. And somebody gives Owen Schroyer a piece of paper, and he's encouraged or ordered or whatever to cover that story on paper, and he doesn't know where it comes from. He hasn't really checked it. He used to be a sports broadcaster. He doesn't know any of these things. And so he starts covering this bit on the air, and he says that, well, the Sandy Hook father claims to have held his dead son. But this can't be true according to this story, because the what was it called? Not obituary. What would they call it? Where they hold dead bodies for examination, the morgue or the
morgue, yeah, or
so
the forensic pathologist that
so
investigate
the body
the
was
coroner. The coroner does autopsies.
so
right?
the dead body was in the custody of somebody else, so the father could not have possibly held this child in his hands. So there's a huge discrepancy that indicates he's lying. It's all a big conspiracy. So he covers this thing on the air, and he wasn't quick enough, and he wasn't experienced enough to say that, well, I don't know about this timeline. I don't know when this body may have been released finally to the parents, because that's what happened. The body was released, but he just covered that thing on the air.
This event, this Sandy Hook event, where 20-year-old Adam Lanza shot and killed 26 people, and most of these were kids, were grade school kids, right? These were young, these are babies, really. It's so heartbreaking. And for Alex Jones to politicize it, to make this tragic event about him and his conspiratorial view of the world, and to say that those parents are crisis actors, is just so monstrous and so cruel, because you have to think about what these poor families were going through. What this is just unbelievable heartbreak. And he is coming in there, and then you have people on the street who see these heartbroken parents, and they spit at them, or they call them names, or they say they're part of some kind of conspiracy, and then they have to endure and death threats to them.
Yeah.
I mean, and they have to endure this because of what Jones has said on his little cyber mob, his video watchers. It's unbelievably rotten.
Every journalist learns that you cannot broadcast lousy information which you have copied from shady websites on the internet, because this is what happened with Owen Schroyer, who was also on the hook for this. They asked him under oath in a deposition, and I think even then in court, they asked him, do you know who runs this website that you quoted? No. Are you aware that this is just some guy in a foreign country? No. Did you check this information before you broadcast it? No. He was making like $100,000 per year on Infowars, plus performance as bonus if you do a viral report that gets attention and gets people to buy stuff from Infowars. So this dude was a sports broadcaster. He doesn't know anything, and the boss was incredibly underqualified, because if you run sort of a scenario like they were claiming, okay, so they would plan a fake shooting with crisis actors, and there's no real dead children, and blah 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 blah. Nobody runs a black op like this. This is not how these operations work.
I mean, it's outrageous. It's just outrageous. And see, this is what a lot of Alex Jones and people, though, on the right, and I've gotten this again and again, but Alex Jones, and they're hypnotized by it. They believe it. Something must be true about it. And they give him credit for insights or whatever, because he's even credited Tucker Carlson, credited him with making all these fabulous predictions. But if you actually look at it, they weren't actually precise predictions of anything.
Yeah, I mean, he covers. I mean, this was his thing.
It's self-fulfilling. He says there's going to be a conspiracy. Then 9/11 happens, and he says it's a conspiracy. The conspiracy he was talking about. I mean,
yeah, or he covered. For many years he covered mainstream news articles about surveillance, about this and that, and you could kind of guess where things are going, and of course they're going that way, and then you can claim he was always right, but he was just covering mainstream news articles. And of course, every journalist knows, and every investigative journalist knows, you can be sued if you mess up. So you got to be careful. You got to check your sources and check them 5 times, right. And you got to run scenarios, and you got to be careful in your report. And once you have money...
And look, Schroyer is a guy who I watched him not long ago saying that China and Russia are the good guys and America's the bad guys.
Yeah.
So this is
And
an
it-
American broadcaster, an Alex Jones associate, and he's taking the side of our national enemies, people who have nuclear weapons pointed at us. That if we get into a world war, they could be annihilating American cities, and he's taking their side.
yeah, and it's like, and of course, when
What?
once you have that kind of money that Infowars used to have, so let's say you have a budget of $7 million a year. This is just your expenses, your payroll, your equipment, people flying, across the country. You have to buy the plane tickets. If you have a $7 million budget, you have enough money to pay a lawyer who specializes in media, to pay him to check reports before they air, to have him look at this. And so the lawyer can suggest, okay, maybe you should take this bit out, maybe you should change the wording here, maybe add that this is speculative, and then it's good to go, right? But they didn't spend that money, even though they had the money. And once everything became this big mess, Alex Jones tried to argue that he's not even a journalist and his people are not journalists. They're just dudes who rant about stuff they found on the web. So then I'm asking, well, aren't they advertising themselves to their audience as, the tip of the spear, leaders of the resistance, we tell the truth, we're the fastest, we always have the best information. But then when they mess up, and they did this a lot, they say we're not journalists, we're just talking, we're just blowing off steam here. And
They would Owen Schroyer would be a successful person. He's making $100,000 a year. He's making six figures.
yeah, he
So
said
he's
that.
a
He said that in
success,
a deposition. I listened to the whole
right?
depositions.
He's a success. Look, in my view, this is why money and advertising and all the bottom feeding crap they sold on that show, and it's nothing but a commercial. I mean, half of it is commercials, right? Ramming it down people's
Yeah.
throats. You live better, have these vitamins, have these whatever nutrients. The fact of the matter is that it's all rotten in my view. I
And they
don't like
can't.
commercials. I don't like doing commercials. What about honest content? What about trying to say the truth? They keep talking about them being truth tellers. They don't care about the truth. It was
Yeah.
just a money making operation. And Alex Jones is a sensationalist.
Yeah, and,
That's
and
all it
so
is.
for example, when you make a report, when you write a piece, when you talk about an issue, it's grim because the threat is real, the threat is serious, and it's the infestation with communist espionage is really big. There's a huge problem. So people can take this as you're depressing me. It's bad news. I don't want to hear bad news. I want to hear there's this big revolution going on, this big movement that I just have to join. I just pay some money. I spend time on it. And it's going in the right direction. And it's this ready-made revolutionary movement like in a Star Wars movie. I just have to join. And this is kind of the thing when you get paid almost $100,000 a year plus performance bonuses. And this guy, Destroyer guy, he was a sports broadcaster, and they did this a bunch of times. They talk like this all the time. They talk about vaccine corporations. They talk about Bill Gates. They talk about Fauci. They talk about all these people. But they're not careful in doing it. They're not professional. If you want to nail someone like Gates, if you want to nail someone like Fauci, you gotta find the right spots and you gotta find the right way and you gotta move step by step. But this takes time, it takes money, and it's not as fast as people would like it to be. So it doesn't sound like a sensation.
They also understand, they are not speaking to people that they want to think critically. Because if you look at their stories and the way they present them, it's really quite almost a hypnotic rant.
Oh, yeah.
Repeating the same with the Illuminati, Rothschilds, banking conspiracy, anti-Semitic undercurrent, pro-Russia, pro-China, anti-American point of view, which is, there's something to be said for everything. But the problem is that it's not really honest, and it's not. You have to wonder if they aren't being paid under the table by a foreign actor, like the Russian Federation. You got to wonder when Alex Jones supports Putin's invasion of of Georgia back in 2008 publicly flax for that. And the way he talks and the way Schroyer talks about Russia and China, you got to wonder, are these people on the payroll of a foreign intelligence service?
I mean,
I mean, it occurs in your mind, agent of influence. Why are you? I mean, where what is this? Or are they just plain screwy up here, where they don't
if
understand where their
Jones
bread is buttered?
if Jones was a different person, let's run the scenario for a second. If he was a different person, if he had been constantly learning and reading, because he admitted on his show, and I have the clip somewhere in a video on my channel, he said that, 10 years ago, I stopped reading books because it's just a luxury and I don't have the time. So he's supposed to be the boss. He's supposed to have the overview. He's supposed to learn, but then he hires the wrong people who don't know anything. This was like 15 years ago. No, it was more like 12 years ago. He tried to hire a more diverse crowd, right? Because he thought the only people listening to me are white dudes, white men. So I want the women, I want the Latinos, I want the African Americans. So then he hires Latinos, African Americans, and women. And this didn't work out. So then comes around 2016, then comes the white power phase at Infowars, and he just hires a bunch of dudes because they're white dudes, right? But let's imagine Alex Jones was a different person. He would have constantly learned about things. He would have hired the right people. This could have been the greatest media company in the world. They could have, contracted you. They could have contracted Julie K. Brown, who brought down Jeffrey Epstein. It was not Alex Jones that brought down Jeffrey Epstein. It was this little woman, very powerful, but little woman, Julie K. Brown, and she didn't even have the money to buy bagels to celebrate her story because she was so broke. But she actually managed to pull this off because she was a professional. Alex Jones could have hired professionals. He could have paid her $100,000 plus per year, plus performance bonuses. Imagine the bonus for the Epstein story. I give you $100,000 extra bonus. And of course, we publish your book about the whole thing, and we make more money out of that, and you make more money out of that. Alex Jones could have claimed my media company. My media company brought down Jeffrey Epstein. He would have been the biggest star in media in the world, right?
But the thing is that in terms of, he thinks that profit is money. He thinks that making this money and selling these bottom feeding products is the way to go. And this is where he doesn't really know where his bread is buttered, because if you sell out your country, if you don't care about the truth, in the long run, you're out of business. In the long run, nobody's going to believe you. Your name is going to be mud. You're going to be a villain in history. So they don't really understand. It's what Socrates taught and Cicero in On Duties. It's they're doing the wrong thing is never expedient. Lying is never expedient. Cheating someone is never expedient. And when you tell something that's not true and people are giving you money, are supporting your products, watching your website, you're cheating them. You're cheating them of their time at the very least.
Yeah,
right?
Imagine if his company physically gets closed down, okay? He doesn't have a studio, he doesn't own a microphone, he doesn't own a camera, he doesn't have staff. So he moves down to the Mexican border, where his wife, according to press reports, bought a property right next to the border, kind of. He moves down there, and then over the border in Mexico, some person, this is just hypothetical, but this might happen over the next couple of months, and then in Mexico, on that side of the border, some rich people with ties to Russia, maybe, some rich people set up a new office, a new media company, and they say, well, we run it, or some offshore company runs it, and we contract Alex Jones. So he goes over the border, does his broadcasting, and then he gets back to the United States and says, well, they don't really pay me much. I can buy food, I can buy this. I still have, my thing here, but they don't pay me that much. And then he goes to work in Mexico, and this whole thing may be run by a Russian middleman or something like that. So we might see more of Jones.
Alex, is the point of the lawsuit to put him out of business, or really to get the $5 million a year out of him until he pays the 900 and something million that he supposedly owned? if you're if this was you're a dad, you have kids. If these were your kids that were killed and you were accused of this and you got death threats and you were scorned in the street by people who listen to Jones because he's everywhere on the alt media, would would you really care about getting the money, or would you just be happy if he's out of business completely?
Well, I would need a certain amount of money to cover the expenses for moving all the time because these activists apparently always find out where these Sandy Hook parents have moved to, and then they get bothered again.
Really?
So they had to move a bunch of times. I think one of the Sandy Hook
Oh,
parents killed himself. There was one
oh no.
suicide, and it's really a problem if you set up your life again. You know, your wife, maybe your surviving child or whatever. You still have a family. You may have left other family members behind because you had to move, and then you have to move again. You just settled in. Your other kid goes to school. You have new friends and everything. A new job, and then it's all over again. You're being harassed day and night. You have to move again. So you do need some money. And it's also about making this stuff stop because it is a chilling effect. Because if somebody is held accountable for this, this shoddy reporting, then others may be discouraged from doing that, right? And it's an old
People,
story anyway, so people may
yeah,
lose interest.
people don't understand that anybody can be accused of anything at any time by someone who's irresponsible or malicious. And what do you do if somebody accuses you of something that's outrageous? I mean, how do you prove your innocence? Prove your innocence, and how do you get your good name back? And how do you, if it's an incitement like Jones is, that there's this evil conspiracy, and now I'm a part of that evil conspiracy? How am I ever safe again? In when there's millions of Alex Jones followers who believe he's spreading a kind of gospel? How?
Yeah, and there's another thing. I mean, um, I remember sort of the golden era of Alex Jones. This was during the Bush admin, right? And Jones always said, I'm a conservative. I'm sort of a libertarian. I like, free markets. I like liberty, Constitution, a Bill of Rights, and people should find common ground. And then he was gathering supporters, people that used to be somewhat on the left and they became more conservative. So he was gathering all kinds of followers and changing them. And he always explained that there needs to be improvement in the Republican Party. You need to get all these Kissinger people out because Kissinger wasn't the only major problem in the Republican or around Republican Party circles, because Kissinger had groomed so many other people. So Kissinger people are everywhere to this day. So they need to go. Some of these weird neocon types, they needed to go. So there was a demand at the time, when Infowars became sort of popular, there was a demand for change in the Republican Party. And the party itself noticed that older voters were dying. Conservative voters were dying. The people that grew up on, Kissinger and these guys. And so there was a need to change for the Republicans. But then came Jones, starting in 2008, when he became closer and closer to the Republican Party. And he got them new voters, especially 2015 and 16. Now, of course, it's better to have a Republican president, but he Jones sort of truthified larger parts of the Republican Party, because we now see this nonsense popping up everywhere in Republican circles. People talk like Jones, politicians started to talk like Jones. So this was not the change that was supposed to happen with the Republicans. And he got them new voters. Back in the old days, Alex Jones followers, they wouldn't probably vote at all. But then they started to vote. And this, of course, made the Republican Party happy because they didn't have to change. They got new voters. So effectively, I'm seeing this correctly? Effectively, Alex Jones did many things to prevent positive change in the Republican Party, because they're still using him. They need him for voters. But what he's giving the Republican Party is more voters that believe crazy stuff, and this can hurt the party as well.
Well, I've got here the NBC News report on this, and it says Infowars host Alex Jones agrees to sell off his assets as he admits he has to pay the Sandy Hook families. And of course, as of that Sandy Hook documentary that HBO put out, he had not paid anything yet. And do you know when was the verdict exactly delivered? How long ago was that?
I think that was 2 years ago. It's been a
Two
long time. Yeah.
years. Mm.
It's been a long time.
Um,
And he said, I mean, Jones
and
said he was going to fight this at every corner. He was going to drag this out. He was going to go through all these different courts and he's going to sit this out, write this out. He said this multiple times on the air, but at some point the hammer is going to fall. And this is just basic legal proceedings. I mean, obviously the Democrats hate Jones and whatnot, but I think that even the silly Democrats know that the Jones audience can simply switch over to these other influencers because they don't really lose anything because Alex Jones isn't really capable of anything special. There's all these other programs out there, and people are just going to listen to those and do those programs.
Is it true that Alex Jones owns 5 homes?
He used to. I mean, he had bought various properties, and the value went up, and then he sold some of them, and he privately used, I think, 2 or 3 homes at some point, but he had to sell those. I think he has 1 left, but then he did say he's going to leave Travis County. It's not exactly.
He's admitted that his net worth is at least $2 million, hasn't he?
He said different numbers. He said, well, I have 2 million to my name or 3 million or whatnot. And there's different number being tossed around. I mean, of course, when the court had an expert of some sort to testify and give his opinion on the company, he gave out this number of, well, he would value this company at, what was it, $170 million or whatever. Of course, this is speculative.
His 5 homes are worth $7.5 million. If I'm remembering that right.
I think it was something like that before he sold them. But he was a man of champagne taste. I mean,
but he has sold them.
Expensive homes, expensive watches, expensive vacations. Fast cars.
I mean, I read that he had like a more than 5,000 square foot Spanish style villa.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I saw the photos.
In Austin's Barton Creek Greenbelt.
Yeah,
I mean, he's got some kind of a property in Colorado that's overlooking a river.
I mean, if he had been doing great reports, if he had hired great people, if he had been, sort of an expert himself, if he'd put out great work, I would be happy to congratulate him on his properties and his cars and his watches and his $50,000 piano or something he bought at some point. I mean, I would be happy for him, right? But he didn't spend the proper money on expert staff. He didn't spend the money on a lawyer to look things over before they broadcast them. He effectively wasted his supporters' money, and this is something he would never admit because he doesn't even want to admit guilt at all. He's just the victim in this. But people have to remember, he wasted his supporters' money and his supporters' time. He gave them a bunch of Russian propaganda. He gave them a bunch of stuff he picked up for free on the web. I mean, how are you supposed to justify all this money that was moved around? For what? Russian propaganda?
Now, people make the argument that Alex Jones is a beacon of free speech and that a lawsuit like this puts a chill on other people's speech. What do you say to that?
Well, people have a right not to be called crisis actors working for the globalists and destroying the Second Amendment and evil conspiracy. I'm not a U.S. citizen, but Americans have that right to not be called all these things, in front of millions of listeners.
In fact, what people forget is that the whole idea of rights comes out of the idea of duties. So what you could call your right is actually my duty to respect you. It's basically what your rights are. You have a right to your property, that I'm not going to come and ransack your house. You have the right to express yourself, but I have to let you speak, except there is no absolute right of free speech. It's kind of a misnomer. The Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution says Congress will make no law, and a lot of the state constitutions have a similar, uh, element in them, that the government can't make laws abridging the rights of free speech in the press. But that being said, you're responsible for what you say. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater when there's no fire, and you can't slander people, right?
Yeah, and
You
every
have a
company.
responsibility, because speech is dangerous. I can destroy people with speech. You
Yeah,
could destroy people with
sure.
speech. So you can't just, I mean, the pen is mightier than the sword. It's a weapon. So that has to be taken into account. So yeah, there's freedom, but there's responsibility,
Ev-
and there's duty.
every time you run any sort of company, you have to be aware of the risks in that particular line of work. If you fix cars, you have to make sure that this is up to standards, and the brakes are not going to fail when you just did the brakes for someone. Other companies, they have other risks they have to be aware of. And if you run a media company that deals with these hot button topics, what's the number one risk to your company? That you say something that is nonsense, that is not backed up by
Yes, right.
facts, and then you get sued. This is kind of, you could frame this. You could put this in a frame, hang this into your office. Do not put out nonsense that you copied for free off of the web, okay? Check your sources. I mean, this is kind of the thing that, Alex
Mhm.
basically claims, like every truther, they claim to be experts on intelligence, but they're not. What does an intelligence officer learn in training? At the very beginning, check your sources. How good is the source? How good is the source? Have you looked at other sources? Is this maybe a deception? Is this bad information? Is somebody selling you, nonsense that he lifted from somewhere?
Well,
This is the first commandment of intelligence work. Check the sources.
if information's a product, and of course you can be a knockdown, drag out free marketeer and say caveat emptor, right? The idea is, well, buyer beware. It's your fault if you believe something that's wrong, or if you. It's a little bit different here with information, because let's face it, people are not too critical. They're not too intelligent about where they pick up. They pick up information the way children may pick up diseases from their peers. You put what in your mouth? After touching what you did.
Yeah.
Um, People are very unsanitary about their information sources, and this is what really bothers me incredibly, is that we have moved away from literate culture to this, as Neil Postman says, entertaining ourselves to death. And of course, I think when Alex Jones was going through his divorce, he argued that he was an entertainer,
Yeah. A
and that his
performance artist.
personality, he put on this personality for his show. That he really wasn't the person that he's depicted, and so he isn't this crazy person that his wife was depicting him as. This is all very convenient, but it's also very rotten and hypocritical to portray yourself as a truth teller for understanding the conspiracies
Yeah,
that
and we
are
get
guiding society.
we get
Yeah.
a lot of, or got a lot of Alex Jones copycats over the years, especially since
Mhm.
2008, right? Or
Oh yeah.
2012 and onwards, 2015. People saw that he was making money. So they thought, I want to do the same. I'm going to say the same things, and I'm going to get an audience, and take market shares away from him. Then the Q movement happened, and they took market shares away from Jones. And then Jones complained, "How dare these newcomers take my market share? I'm the original guy. I did this, 25 years ago." And so you had all these copycats over here doing the exact same stuff. And oftentimes I would look at this material from German influencers, and I would say, I can read the very same stuff on Russian websites, or Russian
Yes.
websites for the West. It's like the same narrative.
Yes.
Oh, a plane gets shot down. You repeat the Russian narrative. Oh, the Crimea gets taken over. you push that narrative. You push the same narrative that the Russians are saying, and then
And you know, it's very funny that how contagious it gets, because there's a bandwagon effect. When Jones becomes popular doing it, because he's packaged it cleverly, and he is a demagogue, so he's got this charismatic way of delivering things, and it sounds authoritative, and it's very alluring in a way, so that people get drawn into it, and he makes it all very exciting, and he gets all wrapped into it. You know, he gets all
yeah,
emotional about it. And this is part of his overblown personality, his overselling of this stuff. And of course, the problem is, like you just noticed, wait a minute, this is coming from Russia. This is a Russian source. This is Russian source material. Um, and then you get, I know another broadcaster, a Christian broadcaster, used to have me on, haven't been on in years. He's now imitating some
mm,
of these Alex Jones, and I had a conversation with him about Alex Jones. I said, I think that Jones is maybe working for the Russians, because he's repeating this Russian stuff, right? How could you repeat Russian stuff over and over again and not somehow be involved in them? What are you, just cribbing off of Russian TV, and then it's your own stuff, and it's not? Why would you do that, right? Is that just laziness? And of course, he was worried about it, but now that Christian broadcaster's repeating the same stuff, pro-Russian stuff. And
yeah,
so I look back on all these people that I've known over the years that I won't go on their shows, Christian broadcasters, secular broadcasters. I won't go on their shows, and I see what they've repeated, and I realize the one thing they all have in common is, like you said about Alex Jones, they don't read books.
yeah. They
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 don't
really don't.
think.
I
They're not
have I have
careful.
that clip, and people can find it on my channel where Jones says, "Well, like 10 years ago, I was reading maybe a handful of books a year, and I don't know what he means by reading, skimming through maybe, And this was years ago when he said, "Well, 10 years ago, I read maybe a handful of books every now and then." But ever since, it's just a luxury, and he doesn't have the time, and it's not necessary. And this
It's
is
a
how this is
luxury.
how this mess happens. And I mean this and of course, people became, many influencers who copied Jones, many became a slave to their own audiences, because the audience is very internet savvy. They will swipe you away, they will close your tab
Yes.
if they start disliking what you're saying. There's no brand loyalty anymore. Any
Right.
newcomer can take away somebody else's spot.
But,
And
but
that's
but you
when,
know, Alex Jones keeps people on the hook by making it sound like he's about to have the ultimate revelation. He's about to show you the secrets behind events. And so people are like, "Oh, I just have to hear this next segment. I have to hear, because I might hear the truth. I might hear the answer, right? So if I just hang on a little bit longer."
yeah,
And let me just say something about unfortunate thing about being a viewer or a listener, not an active thinker and reader, is that, look, reality, think about our media. You have the written word that you're using your imagination, and then you have pictures, photographs, movies, then silent movies, black and white silent movies. Then you add sound, another layer to it. Then you add color,
yeah, yeah,
another
yeah,
layer to it. And as you add these layers, it becomes more real than reality. And the thing is that actually with reading, the real layered reality is that I read something about the defector literature, about the spy angle. Then I read about the military angle. I read the politics. I read the sociology. I read the economics, right? These are the real layers of trying to understand the economics and the sociology and the psychology and the military angle and the intelligence angle, and trying to get all those angles and say, well, when I put these all together in context, what am I seeing happening in the world?
yeah.
And that is not easy.
Yeah, and look at any sort of professional intelligence organization, right? I mean, this country, that country, doesn't matter. They go through mountains of data, and they have people
Yes.
specializing in this, specializing in that, and they double check and quadruple check everything, and then they have group meetings where they discuss the findings. Then they go through stuff again. They always think about, maybe we have missed something important. Okay, maybe this person is a mole, then, these would be the results of that. But maybe that other person is the mole, then this changes the whole game, because, these operations are compromised. So it's like a scientific level effort, and it's not just about the quality of material that you're looking for and that you're handling. It's the quantity. When I tell people, okay, I've read X number of selected quality books, I mean, you're way ahead of me in that sense, right? I mean, once you're in the thousands of quality selected books, that's a whole nother ballgame. Not many people like this actually exist in that sphere. And also, it's almost impossible for anybody else to catch up. I mean, if somebody wants to say, I'm going to be just as knowledgeable as Jeff Nyquist, I want to be just as good as Jeff Nyquist. Well, good luck. It's going to take you, I don't know, 30 years, maybe 40 years if you're really fast. Maybe. I mean, you cannot catch up to this. And
well, the thing is, you have to take it slow because you have to digest what you've read, and then you have to reread many of the books.
oh
And
yeah,
you have to do that layering where you're trying to get the economic understanding and the philosophic understanding and the military understanding. You're trying to get, and the thing is that it's never perfect, and you're forgetting. One of the problems with the human mind is, wait a minute, I forgot all that. I need to refresh my mind, or it's coming back to me, but it's coming back to me a little wrong. So the thing is, the imperfections of the human mind, the imperfections of the memory, is a constant battle. It's like, um, and understand. Of course, you're doing it. The reason you're doing it is to get an understanding that is a real, true sense of things. And this is what you really want when you're dealing with these complex issues. Politics takes in all of these issues: economics, sociology, psychology, religion, philosophy. It takes in all of these things, and then there's all the nuances of the actual political events, like these news stories that we're reading about, and then there's the problem of, but people just want to be entertained.
oh yeah,
They're drawn. There's the problem, and this is what Gustav Le Bon wrote in his book on the crowd. He
yeah.
said the crowd is very primitive. It operates on these primitive instincts, and intellect can be wiped out by it. And this is
Yeah,
what
so
Neil
he
Postman
described
says.
group narcissism before the
Yeah,
medical literature even had that.